My hands still shake when I think about that day, the day I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to my Harold, my own husband of 45 years. Can you imagine that? Not being allowed at your own husband's funeral? I'm Margaret Thompson, Maggie to those who know me well, and at 71 I never thought I'd be telling a story like this. Takes a deep breath, adjusts her cardigan. I should start from the beginning, I suppose. Harold and I built everything together. We were high school sweethearts who married young. He was a talented mechanic who started with nothing but a toolbox and a dream. I worked double shifts as a nurse to help him open his first garage. We saved every penny, lived in a tiny apartment above the shop for years. That garage eventually grew into Thompson's Auto Service, the most respected mechanic shop in our county. We had one son, Bradley, our pride and joy. We gave him everything: college education, a beautiful wedding, down payment for his first house. Harold taught him everything about the business, hoping he'd take over someday. But then Bradley met Vanessa. Sighs, looks directly at the camera. Vanessa Parker, the perfectly polished lawyer from the city with her fancy degree and family connections. From the moment she entered our lives, something changed in Bradley. Suddenly, our simple family dinners weren't good enough. My cooking was too heavy. Our home was too dated. I was too old-fashioned. At first, I tried so hard. Lord knows I did. New recipes, redecorating the house, even changed how I dressed when they visited. Nothing was ever good enough for Miss Vanessa. And gradually, Bradley started seeing me through her eyes. Harold noticed it too. Give them time, he'd say. Bradley will come around. But the visits became fewer, phone calls shorter. They were always too busy for Sunday dinners. Then Harold got sick. Cancer. It happened so fast, 3 months from diagnosis to... Wipes a tear. Her voice breaks slightly. I called Bradley the day the doctors said Harold had weeks left. He and Vanessa visited exactly twice during those final days. Twice. Harold asked to speak with Bradley alone during the second visit. I later found out he'd told our son about his concerns, how Vanessa had been pressuring him to sell the business property for a commercial development, how she'd been suggesting I would be happier in an assisted living facility after he was gone. The night Harold passed, I was holding his hand. He squeezed mine 3 times, our code for I love you, and then he was gone. I called Bradley immediately. He and Vanessa arrived an hour later. She took charge immediately, talking about arrangements while I was still in shock. We'll handle everything, Margaret, she said. Not Mom, not Maggie, and always Margaret, like I was some stranger. You're in no condition to make decisions. The next day, Bradley came alone. He sat awkwardly at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed him thousands of meals, and couldn't look me in the eye. Mom, we think it's best if you don't attend the funeral service. I thought I'd misheard him. What did you say? Vanessa thinks, we think your presence might be too emotional. You know how you get, Mom, the crying, the dramatics. Dad wouldn't want his funeral to turn into a spectacle. Her face hardens. A spectacle? My grief for my husband was a spectacle? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Bradley, I was married to your father for 45 years. I have every right. Mom, he interrupted. Vanessa says your energy has been really negative lately. The service needs to be dignified. We're inviting Dad's business associates, community leaders. Vanessa's family will be there. Ah, now I understood. This wasn't about Harold at all. This was about appearances. About impressing Vanessa's wealthy family and connections. You can visit the grave privately afterward, he added, as if offering a generous compromise. I sat there in shock, unable to process what my own son was saying to me. That's when he dropped another bombshell. Also, we'll need the keys to the shop. Keys. Vanessa has some potential buyers who want to look at the property. Buyers? Harold just died last night. Bradley had the decency to look uncomfortable. It's just preliminary discussions, Mom. Dad's business was his biggest asset. We need to think about the estate. I knew then that Harold had been right about Vanessa's plans, and somehow she had convinced my son to go along with them, to even bar his own mother from her husband's funeral. After Bradley left, I sat alone in the house that suddenly felt too empty, too quiet. I thought about calling my sister in Arizona, but pride stopped me. I didn't want anyone to know how far my son had fallen, how cruel he had become. That night I cried until there were no tears left. Then something hardened in me, a resolve I didn't know I still had at my age. No, Harold, I whispered to the empty room. I won't let them erase me. I won't let them take what we built. What Bradley and Vanessa didn't know was that Harold had suspected this might happen. He was always the smart one, my Harold, always thinking ahead. And he had left me something that would change everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I had to decide, would I respect my son's wishes and stay away from the funeral? Or would I fight for my right to say goodbye to the love of my life? Looks directly at the camera, her eyes now dry and determined. What would you have done? Adjusts her reading glasses. Sips from a teacup. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. I kept replaying Bradley's words in my head. Your negative energy. Dad wouldn't want a spectacle. As if Harold would ever have been embarrassed by my love for him. By my grief. By morning I'd made my decision. I wouldn't cause a scene, not yet. But I absolutely would not miss my husband's funeral. Harold deserved better than that. We deserved better than that. I called my old friend Dottie. We've known each other since nursing school, more than 50 years now. She picked up on the first ring, already aware of Harold's passing from our church prayer chain. Maggie, honey, how are you holding up? Her voice was warm, concerned, everything my son's voice should have been. Dottie, you won't believe what's happening. I told her everything. The funeral ban, the property buyers, how quickly Bradley and Vanessa were moving to dismantle the life Harold and I had built. Those ungrateful little... Dottie has always had a colorful vocabulary. So what are you going to do? First, I need to find something. Harold mentioned he left me something important in his toolbox, his old one from when we first started out. After hanging up with Dottie, I went to the garage, Harold's sanctuary. The place still smelled like him, motor oil, that special soap he used to clean grease from his hands, and the peppermints he always kept in his pocket. I found myself talking to him as I searched. Where did you put it, love? What were you trying to tell me? The old red toolbox was on the highest shelf. Harold knew I could barely reach it, which meant whatever he hid there, he didn't want anyone else to find easily. I dragged over his work stool and stretched up on tiptoes. My fingers brushed against the dusty metal. With a grunt, I managed to hook 2 fingers on the handle and slide it toward me. Inside, beneath layers of old tools and memorabilia, I found a sealed envelope and a small USB drive taped to the bottom of the toolbox. My heart raced as I carried them back to the kitchen table. The envelope contained legal documents, Harold's actual will, notarized and dated just 3 weeks ago, along with a letter to me in his shaky handwriting. Looks down, reading from an imaginary letter. My dearest Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've had reason to look here. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I suspect that means Bradley and Vanessa are already making moves. The USB drive contains a recording of a conversation I had with them last month. What you hear will break your heart, but you need to know the truth. They don't know I was recording. I've updated my will. The shop and our home now go directly to you, not through the estate. My lawyer, Jim Green, has the original copy. The land goes to you as well, with one condition. It cannot be sold for 10 years. This should stop their plans for now. I'm sorry I won't be there to fight this battle with you, but you're the strongest woman I've ever known. Remember what we always said? Thompsons don't break. They bend and bounce back. All my love forever and always, Harold. Wipes a tear, composes herself. With trembling hands, I took the USB drive to our old computer in the den. Harold was never one for new technology, but he'd learned enough to do the books for the shop. When I plugged in the drive, I found a single video file. The video showed Harold in his hospital bed. It must have been during one of my coffee breaks. Bradley and Vanessa stood at the foot of the bed, not holding their father's hand, not comforting him, just standing there in their expensive clothes, looking impatient. I know what you're planning. Harold's voice was weak but determined. I overheard you in the hallway yesterday. Vanessa's perfectly made-up face registered surprise, then quickly composed itself. I don't know what you're talking about, Harold. Don't lie to me, girl, not now. My Harold had never spoken so harshly before. I heard you telling Bradley that as soon as I'm gone, you're going to sell the shop property to that developer friend of yours. That you're going to put Maggie in Sunny Pines Care Center and use her house money for your beach house down payment. Bradley at least had the decency to look ashamed. Dad, it's not like that. Mum would be better off with professional care and the shop. Well, neither of us knows how to run it. You could learn, Harold said simply. I've offered to teach you for 20 years. Be practical, Harold, Vanessa cut in. That land is worth millions to developers. The business itself is outdated. And frankly, Margaret isn't getting any younger. She'll need care soon. Harold's face hardened on the screen. Maggie is sharper at 71 than you'll ever be, Vanessa. And that outdated business put your husband through college and paid for your wedding. Dad, please. Bradley tried to sound soothing. We're just thinking about the future. No, Harold replied. You're thinking about yourselves, always have been. The video continued for another few minutes. More arguments, more justifications from them, more quiet dignity from my Harold, but I'd heard enough. Takes a deep breath, I sat in Harold's chair for a long time after the video ended, clutching his old cardigan that still hung on the back. So, it was worse than I thought. They weren't just excluding me from the funeral. They were planning to erase me completely, put me away somewhere and take everything Harold and I had built. I called Jim Green, Harold's lawyer, and our friend for 30 years. He confirmed everything. The new will was valid and filed. The property transfers were already in process. Harold had made sure I would be protected. "Does Bradley know about the new will?" I asked. "No," Jim replied. "Harold was explicit that it should only be revealed after the funeral. He said," Jim paused, "he said you'd know when the time was right." Small, sad smile. "Oh, Harold." Even from beyond, he was giving me the space to make my own decision, to find my own justice. The funeral was scheduled for 2 days later at Graceland Memorial Chapel. I knew what I had to do, but first I needed allies. I called Dottie back, and then reached out to Henry, Harold's best friend and business partner for 40 years. Then I contacted the 4 mechanics who had worked at the shop for decades, men who had watched Bradley grow up and who had been like family to us. By the evening we had a plan. Not a revenge exactly. Justice, perhaps. Or maybe just a lesson long overdue. The morning of the funeral, I dressed in Harold's favorite blue dress, the one he said matched my eyes. I pinned his mother's brooch to my collar and slipped his wedding band onto a chain around my neck. "I'm coming, love," I whispered to his photo on our dresser. "And I'm bringing the truth with me." Dottie arrived at 9:30, determined and loyal as always. She helped me gather what we needed and drove me to the chapel. "Ready?" she asked as we pulled into the parking lot. I watched as Bradley and Vanessa greeted guests at the door, playing the grieving son and supportive daughter-in-law to perfection. Vanessa was dressed in an expensive black suit that looked more appropriate for a business meeting than a funeral. Bradley seemed hollow, going through motions. For a moment, my heart ached for my boy, the real Bradley, who was lost somewhere inside that man. "No," I answered Dottie honestly, "but Harold is waiting, and I've never kept that man waiting a day in my life." Straightens shoulders, looks directly at the camera. I was about to teach my son and his wife the most important lesson of their lives. Never underestimate an old woman who has nothing left to lose. Settles into her chair, smooths her skirt. The look on Bradley's face when he saw me walking up those chapel steps. I'll carry that to my own grave. Shock, embarrassment, and a flash of the little boy who once couldn't fall asleep unless I was sitting by his bed. For just a moment I saw my son again. Then Vanessa spotted me. Her perfectly arched eyebrows drew together. Her red lips pressed into a thin line. She grabbed Bradley's arm and whispered something urgent. My son's face hardened again, and he moved to intercept me. "Mom," he hissed, blocking my path. "We talked about this. You shouldn't be here." I looked him straight in the eyes. "I'm here to bury my husband, Bradley. Your father. Step aside." Vanessa appeared at his elbow, all false concern. "Margaret, this isn't good for you. You're too emotional. We arranged for a private viewing tomorrow, remember? Just for you." Her voice dripped with condescension, like she was speaking to a confused child. That's when Dottie stepped forward. My Dottie, 5'0" of pure backbone. "You listen here, Missy. This woman was married to Harold Thompson for 45 years. If anyone belongs at his funeral, it's her." Vanessa's eyes widened. She wasn't used to being challenged. "And who are you exactly?" "I'm the woman who'll make a scene so big it'll make the evening news if you don't let Maggie in right now." Dottie smiled sweetly. "Imagine how that would look to all your fancy friends." People were starting to stare. Vanessa was many things, but she wasn't stupid. A public confrontation would ruin the dignified image she was so desperate to project. She forced a tight smile. "Of course Maggie can attend. We just wanted to spare her the stress." Bradley looked conflicted but moved aside. As I passed him, I placed my hand on his cheek, a mother's touch he hadn't allowed in years. "What happened to you?" I whispered. It wasn't accusatory, just sad, bewildered. He had no answer. The chapel was beautiful. Harold would have hated it. All those formal flower arrangements, the somber organ music. My husband was a man who whistled while he worked, who preferred wildflowers picked from our meadow over anything store-bought. This sterile ceremony wasn't him at all. I took a seat in the back row, though by rights I should have been in front. Dottie sat beside me, her hand firmly gripping mine. One by one, Harold's friends noticed me and came to pay their respects. Henry, his business partner, the mechanics from the shop, neighbors we'd known for decades. "Why are you back here, Maggie?" Henry asked, genuinely confused. "Ask my son," I replied quietly. The ceremony began. A minister who had never met Harold spoke generic platitudes about a man he didn't know. Bradley gave a stiff eulogy that could have been about any father, any man. Not a word about Harold's humor, his generosity to employees, how he'd never turned away a customer who couldn't pay in full. Nothing about how he taught the neighborhood kids basic car maintenance for free every summer. Then, Vanessa stepped up. My hands clenched in my lap as she began to speak. Harold Thompson welcomed me into his family with open arms, she said, the lie flowing smoothly. He was so proud of the business he built, and in his final days, he shared with Bradley and me his wishes for its future. Shakes head in disbelief. The audacity of that woman, using my husband's funeral to lay groundwork for their plans. I felt something snap inside me. Enough was enough. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I believe I have something to add." The room went silent. Vanessa froze mid-sentence, her eyes darting to Bradley in panic. He half rose from his seat, but Henry placed a firm hand on his shoulder, keeping him down. I walked slowly to the front of the chapel, to the podium where my husband's closed casket lay surrounded by flowers he wouldn't have recognized. I placed my hand on the smooth wood for a moment, drawing strength. "Harold Thompson was my husband for 45 years, I began. "We built everything we had together from nothing. That auto shop started with a toolbox and a dream." I looked directly at Bradley. "Your father wanted to pass it on to you. That was always his plan, his legacy for his son." I turned to address the gathered mourners. "What you may not know is that my son and his wife decided I shouldn't be here today, that my grief would be too messy, too embarrassing." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the room. Vanessa's face flushed red. Bradley stared at the floor. "But Harold knew," I continued. "He knew what was happening in his final days, and he left a message." I nodded to Henry, who stood and walked to the back of the chapel, where he connected the USB drive to the audio-visual system. A moment later, Harold's face appeared on the large screen used for memorial slideshows. "What is this?" Vanessa hissed, rising to her feet. "Turn that off immediately." But it was too late. Harold's recorded voice filled the chapel. "If you're watching this, I'm gone," he began. My heart clenched at the sound, and my Maggie has found herself in a situation I tried to prevent. The recording was different from what I'd seen before. This was a deliberate message, filmed when Harold was alone. He looked tired but determined, his blue eyes clear and focused. "To my friends and neighbors, thank you for coming today. I hope you're celebrating more than mourning. I had a good life with the best woman a man could ask for." Then his expression grew serious. "I need to set some things straight. My son Bradley and his wife Vanessa have been planning to sell off my business and property against my wishes. They've also discussed putting my Maggie in a care home, not because she needs it, but to free up our house for sale." Gasps echoed through the chapel. All eyes turned to Bradley and Vanessa, who stood frozen in horror. "I don't say this to shame my son," Harold continued. "I say it because the truth matters. Maggie and I built our life on honesty, on doing right by people." He paused, his eyes seeming to look right through the screen. "Bradley, son, there's still time to be the man I raised you to be, the man your mother and I know you can be." Tears streamed down my face as Harold's image leaned closer to the camera. "And Maggie, my love, you deserve better. You always have. Don't let anyone push you aside or make you feel small. Not ever." His voice broke slightly. "I love you, sweetheart. 3 squeezes, remember? Always." Pauses, composing herself. The video ended. The chapel was absolutely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat, feel every pair of eyes on me, on Bradley, on Vanessa. For a moment, we were suspended in time. Then Bradley stood up. His face was ashen, tears streaming down his cheeks. He looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in years. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. Just that one word. Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Bradley, don't. She's manipulating you. This is exactly the spectacle we wanted to avoid." Her voice was frantic, her perfect composure cracking. He shook her hand off. "Is it true?" he asked her. "All of it? The care home? The developers?" Vanessa's expression hardened. "We discussed options, practical options. Your father was a sentimental old man who couldn't see the potential. That sentimental old man was my father," Bradley interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "And this woman," he gestured to me, "is my mother." I stood very still, watching my son find his way back to himself. It wasn't vindication I felt in that moment. It was something closer to relief, like seeing someone you love wake from a long, troubled sleep. Bradley walked toward me slowly. The chapel remained utterly silent, bearing witness. When he reached me, he fell to his knees, my grown son kneeling before me in front of everyone. "I'm so sorry, Mum," he sobbed, his head bowed. "I don't know who I've become. Please forgive me." I placed my hand on his head, feeling the same soft hair I'd stroked when he was a child with nightmares, when he'd fallen off his bike, when his first girlfriend had broken his heart. "Stand up, Bradley," I said gently. "Your father is watching." Takes a deep breath. That was the moment everything changed. Not just for Bradley and me, but for everyone in that room. People saw the truth that day, not just about my situation, but about their own lives, about what really matters in the end. As for Vanessa, well, her story wasn't quite finished yet. Leans forward, eyes glinting, pours herself another cup of tea, adjusts her shawl. The rest of the funeral was, well, I wouldn't call it peaceful, but it was honest. And that's what Harold would have wanted. People came up to share real stories about him, like the time he stayed open during that terrible blizzard of '98, fixing chains and giving out coffee to stranded travelers, or how he'd quietly paid for Joey Miller's car repairs for years after Joey lost his job at the mill. Those stories, that was the real Harold. My Harold. Vanessa disappeared immediately after the confrontation, just grabbed her designer purse and walked out, her heels clicking angrily on the chapel floor. No one tried to stop her. Bradley sat beside me for the remainder of the service, occasionally reaching for my hand like he used to as a little boy. Afterward, we held a proper reception at our house, the home Harold and I had shared for nearly 4 decades. People brought dishes, told stories, laughed and cried together. It was messy and imperfect, and exactly right. I caught Bradley standing in his father's study at one point, just looking at the fishing photos on the wall, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I gave him his space. Grief is a private thing, even when shared. Later that evening, when most guests had gone, Bradley and I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where just days earlier he had told me I couldn't attend my own husband's funeral. "I don't know how to fix this, Mom," he said, staring into his coffee cup. "I don't know if I can." "Start by telling me the truth," I replied. "All of it." Sighs deeply, and so he did. How Vanessa had started small, little comments about how I was too controlling with Bradley, how Harold and I were holding Bradley back from his potential, how our family business was quaint, but not the future Bradley deserved. "She made it sound so reasonable," Bradley said, his voice hollow, "like she just wanted what was best for me, for us. And then it was like I started seeing everything through her eyes. Including your parents," I added quietly. He nodded, unable to look at me. "The developer approached Vanessa through her firm about 6 months ago. Wanted the whole property. The shop, the house, even the back acreage, millions of dollars, Mom. And what about me?" I asked. "Where did I fit into these plans?" Bradley's face crumpled. "Sunny Pines was her idea. She said you'd be happier there, with people your own age, that the house was too much for you to manage alone. And you believed that?" "I don't know what I believed anymore," he whispered. "It's like I've been sleepwalking for years." I reached across the table and took his hand, my son's hand now with calluses different from his father's. Office calluses, not working man's hands. "Your father was right, you know. There's still time to be the man we raised you to be." Straightens in her chair the next morning brought new challenges. Jim Green, Harold's lawyer, came to the house for the official reading of the will. Bradley sat beside me on the sofa, looking equal parts nervous and resolved. Jim had just begun reviewing the documents when the doorbell rang. It was Vanessa, with another man in an expensive suit, her boss from the law firm, as it turned out. "We're here for the will reading," she announced, brushing past me into my own home as if she owned it already. "As Bradley's wife, I have a right to be present." Jim looked to me. It was my house, my decision. I nodded once. "Let her stay. I want everything in the open from now on." The look of triumph on Vanessa's face quickly faded as Jim read through Harold's will. Everything, the house, the business, the property, came directly to me, with specific provisions that none of it could be sold for 10 years without unanimous consent from a small board of trustees. Me, Henry, and the shop's longest-serving employee, Mike. "This is ridiculous," Vanessa interrupted. "Harold wasn't in his right mind when he made these changes. We'll contest it." Jim looked at her calmly over his reading glasses. "Mrs. Thompson, I've been Harold's attorney for 30 years. I personally verified his competence when he updated his will 3 weeks ago. You're welcome to contest, but I should warn you that Harold also recorded our entire meeting." He smiled thinly. He became quite fond of recording important conversations toward the end. Vanessa's boss shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Vanessa." "There's nothing to discuss," she snapped. "Bradley is Harold's only child. He has rights to his father's estate. And he's provided for," Jim continued, turning a page. "Harold left Bradley his collection of vintage cars and tools, along with a trust that pays out over 10 years, conditional on Bradley working at the shop for that period." Bradley's head snapped up. "Dad wanted me to run the shop." "Actually," Jim said, "he wanted you to learn the business from the ground up, starting as a mechanic under Mike's supervision and working your way to management. If Mike and the other employees agree, you've earned it." Slight smile. Oh, the look on Vanessa's face. Look on I. The 10-year structured payout meant no immediate windfall, no quick sale, no beach house, and Bradley would have to work, really work, for the first time in his adult life. "This is your mother's doing," Vanessa hissed at Bradley. "She turned your father against us." Bradley stood up slowly. "No, Vanessa, we did this to ourselves." He turned to me. "I'll do it, Mom, whatever it takes. I want to make things right." Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious. You're going to become a grease monkey? Working for your mother? What about our plans?" "Your plans," Bradley corrected quietly. "They were always your plans. What happened next still gives me a small guilty pleasure when I think about it." Vanessa completely lost her composure. The sophisticated lawyer mask dropped away, revealing the calculating woman beneath. "I've wasted 7 years with you," she shouted. 7 years trying to mold you into something worthwhile. And now you're choosing this nothing life with your pathetic mother in this backwater town." Bradley didn't raise his voice, just looked at her with newfound clarity. "Yes, I am. And I should have done it a long time ago." Vanessa turned to me then, her beautiful face twisted with rage. "This isn't over, old woman. I'll make sure everyone knows what you did, manipulating a dying man, turning a son against his wife." I stood up, suddenly feeling every one of my 71 years and finding strength in them. "Go ahead, Vanessa. Tell anyone you'd like. Show them exactly who you are." I stepped closer to her. "But remember, I have the recordings, all of them, including the one where you told Bradley that Sunny Pines has a special wing for difficult cases where they're too medicated to cause problems." Her face went pale. "You're bluffing." "Try me," I said softly. "Harold wasn't the only one who learned to be careful in his final days." Straightens her shoulders. She left after that, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the family photos in the hallway. Her boss followed, already on his phone, damage control no doubt. I didn't expect we'd see Vanessa again, at least not directly. Women like her don't fight fair and they don't give up easily. Bradley and I stood in silence for a moment after they left. "She'll file for divorce," he said finally. "Yes," I agreed. "She will. I don't know if I can do this, Mom. Run the shop. Be who Dad wanted me to be." I took his face in my hands, the way I used to when he was small and needed reassurance. "Your father didn't want you to be anyone but yourself, Bradley. The real you, not who Vanessa tried to shape you into. And yes, you can do this. You're a Thompson. Thompsons don't break," he said softly, remembering the old family saying. "They bend and bounce back." Smiles, eyes glistening. The next few months weren't easy. Vanessa did file for divorce, trying to claim part of Bradley's inheritance even though it was structured as a trust. She spread rumors about me around town, that I was going senile, that I had manipulated Harold on his deathbed. But our community knew better. They'd seen the real Vanessa at the funeral. Bradley moved into the apartment above the shop, the same one Harold and I had lived in when we first started the business. He worked alongside Mike and the other mechanics, coming home with grease-stained hands and gradually a growing sense of pride. It wasn't smooth sailing. He made mistakes. There were arguments. Days when the weight of grief and regret seemed too heavy to bear. But we persevered, together. 6 months after Harold's passing, I visited the shop unannounced. I stood quietly in the doorway, watching my son explain a transmission repair to an elderly customer, taking extra time, showing genuine care. He looked up and saw me, his face breaking into a smile that reached his eyes, a smile I hadn't seen in years. In that moment, I knew Harold was watching too, and I knew that despite everything, the betrayal, the hurt, the painful revelations, we were going to be okay. Takes a deep breath. That night I sat on our back porch, Harold's favorite spot, and watched the sunset. I felt his presence so strongly I almost expected to feel his hand on my shoulder. "We did it, love," I whispered to the evening air. "We saved what matters." And somewhere deep inside I felt it, 3 gentle squeezes around my heart. His way of saying even now, "I love you." looks directly at the camera. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry about what happened, about being excluded from my husband's funeral, about my son's betrayal, about Vanessa's schemes. And the truth is, I was angry, furious even. But anger burns itself out eventually, leaving room for something else. In my case, that something else was gratitude. Gratitude that Harold had the foresight to protect me. Gratitude that my son found his way back. Gratitude for the life we built and the legacy that continues. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making others suffer. It's finding your peace despite their best efforts. That's what Harold taught me right until the end, and that's the lesson I hope to pass on. Smiles gently, settles comfortably in her chair, a photo album open in her lap. 2 years have passed since that funeral day. So much has changed, yet some things remain beautifully constant. The shop is thriving. Bradley has a natural talent for the work, just like his father always believed. The old customers stayed loyal, and word spread about the quality of service and the integrity behind the business. Thompson's Auto Service now has a waiting list. Vanessa. Well, her story took some interesting turns. The divorce was finalized about a year ago. She fought hard for a piece of the inheritance, but Jim Green, bless that man, had bulletproof documentation. In the end, she left with less than she brought into the marriage, her reputation in tatters among the legal community, after some of her more unsavory tactics came to light. Last I heard, she'd moved to the city and was working for a smaller firm. Sometimes I almost feel sorry for her. Almost. Some people spend their whole lives chasing what they think will make them happy, never realizing they're running in the wrong direction. Turns a page in the photo album. As for me, I've found a new rhythm to life without Harold. I volunteer at the hospital 3 days a week. Once a nurse, always a nurse, I suppose. I've started a small grief support group at the community center. Turns out my experience helps others navigate their own losses, their own betrayals. There's healing in sharing our stories. The house stays busy. Bradley comes for dinner twice a week. He's seeing someone new, a kindergarten teacher named Laura who volunteers at the animal shelter. She brings homemade bread and asks me for my recipes. She looks at Bradley like she sees the good in him, not what she can shape him into. Harold would approve. Pauses, tracing a photograph with her fingertip. Last month marked what would have been our 47th anniversary. I visited Harold's grave with wildflowers from our meadow, the kind he always preferred over store-bought arrangements. I sat there for a long time telling him about the shop, about Bradley's progress, about the grandchildren from our nieces and nephews who come to visit now. You'd be proud, I told him, of all of us. As I was leaving, I noticed an expensive car parked nearby. The driver's side door opened, and to my surprise out stepped Vanessa. She froze when she saw me, clearly not expecting anyone else to be there. For a moment we just looked at each other across the cemetery grass. I could have ignored her, could have walked past without acknowledgement, but something in her face, a vulnerability I'd never seen before, made me stop. He was a good man, I said simply. She nodded, her perfect composure slipping just slightly. Yes, she replied. He was. We didn't say anything else. What was there to say? But as I walked away, I realized something important. The anger I'd carried was truly gone. Not forgotten, never that, but transformed into something quieter, something that no longer demanded to be fed. Closes the photo album gently. Life goes on, you see, it has to. Even after betrayal, even after loss, even after the kind of pain you think might end you. Harold knew that. It's why he left those recordings, not just to expose the truth, but to force us all to face it and then somehow find a way forward. Bradley and I talk about Harold often now. Not just the end, but all of it. The good years, the struggles, the quiet everyday moments that make up a life. We're rebuilding something important between us. It's not the same as before, it never could be, but it's real, it's honest. Last week, Bradley suggested we expand the business. Not too much, he hastened to add, seeing my expression. Just enough to help more people. Maybe a scholarship program for young mechanics. In Dad's name. I couldn't have been prouder. Not just of the idea, but of the man behind it. The real Bradley. The one who had found his way back to himself, to his values, to his family. Looks directly at the camera, so that's my story. Not the one I expected to be telling at this stage of my life. Certainly not one I would have chosen. But it's mine. Ours. Harold's and mine and Bradley's. People sometimes ask if I regret exposing the truth at the funeral, if I regret the public nature of it all. I tell them no, some truths need witnesses. Some moments of justice deserve to be seen. Rises slowly, walks to the window. The shop is visible from here, just down the hill. The neon sign Harold installed in 1985 still glows in the evenings. I can see Bradley's truck parked outside, see him talking with customers, his hands gesturing the way Harold's used to. From this distance, the resemblance takes my breath away sometimes. Touches her wedding ring, still worn on her left hand. I think that's what revenge really is in the end. Not making others suffer for their wrongs, though sometimes that happens naturally. Real revenge is refusing to let someone else's cruelty define you. It's continuing to build something beautiful in the face of those who tried to tear it down. Harold understood that. It took me longer to learn it, but I'm glad I did. Smiles softly. They tried to exclude me from my own life, from my own husband's farewell. Instead, they gave me the chance to reclaim everything that mattered. My dignity, my son, our legacy. And for that, strangely enough, I'm almost grateful. 3 gentle taps on her heart. I love you too, Harold. Always.